Pledge of Allegiance, announcements. I'll do a short introduction with your name and your title, or whatever I have up here, and then if you want to say anything about what you do, feel free. Some over 9 minutes. Okay, I think we're about ready. Good afternoon, Tiger Bay. We're going to get started. Thank you all for being here. My name is Misty Servia. I am the president of Tiger Bay. And as always, we are going to first ask you to shut off your cell phones, take a seat, and we are going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you again for being here today. This is a great crowd, great turnout. Just a couple of announcements before we get started. Number one, renew your membership. For those of you who have not renewed your membership, please do so. Take just a minute today and stop by the desk and renew your membership. And for those of you who have never been members before and our guests here today, please consider becoming a member of Tiger Bay. It is through those memberships that we can continue this program every month. Also, I'd like to remind you all to save the date on your calendar, October 21st, and you are going to be invited to a joint program between this club, Manatee Tiger Bay, and the Lakewood Ranch Business Alliance. And the topic of discussion at that meeting, which will occur out at Lakewood Ranch at the Polo Grill, is the diverging diamond and traffic issues at that intersection. So please make sure to put that on your calendar. Also, just a reminder about our new program that we have here. We have the Tiger by the Tail program. For those of you who do not know what that is, we will be awarding prizes to the person with the most engaging and thoughtful question today. So the first part of the program, we're going to have our speakers present. The second part, we're going to have questions and answers. Get your question thought out. Make sure it's good, because we have two great prizes, a tiger pin that you can proudly wear, and also a basket of the most delicious cookies you'll ever have, graciously donated by Cindy Unsicker. The rules of the program are simple. I'll go over them very quickly. We're going to begin with remarks, as I've mentioned, and then at the second half of the program, if you are a member, and only if you are a member, you can ask a question. We'll ask that you approach the mic, state your name, tell us that you're a member, and then the most important part, please ask a question. Please do not make a statement. Please try to be concise, because we'd like to get as many questions on the tape here as we can. All right, and with that, I would like to thank Ben Bacher and his committee for putting this great program together. Great job, Ben, as you can see by the turnout. Okay, just a brief introduction of our speakers. We have Ogden Clark to my left here, who is the Ambassador Program Coordinator for the Neighborhood Services Department of Manatee County. We all know Jackie Dzelski, Executive Vice President of the Manatee Chamber of Commerce. And last but not least, Mr. Tim Polk, Director of the Department of Planning and Community Development for the City of Bradenton. So with that, we're going to begin in alphabetical order with Ogden Clark.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ogden Clark, and I work with Manatee County Government in the Neighborhood Services Department. And today I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about millennials, this topic that we've been hearing a lot about. And as the title of today's forum is, why do millennials matter? We want to have a little discussion about that. And then talk about what millennials' needs are, and then a little bit about what government and what we're doing at the county to try to meet some of those needs, and then how we can be activists and both millennials and the government and businesses, how we can get this kind of going and have that discussion. So the first thing I want to talk about is millennials, and we've been hearing a lot about millennials in the news nationally. It's something that, how many of you guys know what millennials are? Do you need that defined? You're right. So it's somebody that's born between 1980 and 2000. And they're individuals that in the last couple of years, they're starting to start their families. They're becoming economic drivers. And around the country, people are discussing and talking about them. Millennials are tech savvy. They're a little bit different. Their needs are a little bit different than other people in society. So that's probably why you're hearing a lot of that. I want to go ahead and share something with you. This is a stigma that millennials need to try to surpass, and that is that millennials are lazy, they're not doing anything, they don't want to be involved in politics. I want to share a quote with you from the New York Times, and that is that the now generation has become the me generation. How many of you think that's about millennials? Right, it's about your generation. It came in 1976, and it's the reason I share that quote with you is it's the same tale. It's the same tale with every generation. We're starting to make our name in society, and we're starting to define what those things are. When we think about baby boomers, we think about social change. We think about the things that they accomplish, and we have not yet accomplished those things. So we're starting to define that process, and that's why we're having the discussion about it now. What I want to talk to you about, an issue that's close to my heart, an issue that keeps me up late at night thinking about it, is that in the next 5 years, by 2020, millennials nationally will need to make up 50% of the workforce. And right now, here currently in Manatee County, we make up 21% of the workforce. So if you can imagine what that means that we need to grow considerably in the workforce. And here, the local numbers projected are not exactly the same, but we're still near half. It's about 45% that we'll need to make up in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's a really important issue. That's something that industries like hospitality and healthcare and the things that are important to us here in this community, we're going to need to have the millennial workforce to support that. And what we're hearing now and what we're seeing now is about a 2% decrease in that population every year since 2010. Millennials are picking up and they're moving. They're going elsewhere. And so why is that? Well, then again, that goes back to the fact that they have needs. They have things that that they're attracted to, and we need to attract and retain those millennials. And how do we attract and retain them? Do we put a little piece of cheese out there for them or something like that? There's things that appeal to millennials. There's things that as they go to USF and SEF and the colleges here locally, there's something that's driving them away from us. They're being trained in hospitality. We have a huge tourism community here. We're driven by that, but they're picking up and moving elsewhere. And why is that? And that's because our community is maybe not meeting their needs. And I'm sure most of you have family, have kids or grandkids that you'd like to stay in this area. This is a topic that we hear as we go around and talk to people, and that's really, at the county, we spent the last 6 months, myself and our millennial team, the Manatee Millennial Movement, going out, engaging people, talking to them, and really the three big players in all of this are developers, we have consumers, and then the final piece is the government. They're the regulators. And so we've tried to address all three of those as much as possible and started a conversation with them. And some of the things that we found in that conversation is what those two major focuses are for these individuals, these millennial people that we're talking about. And the first of those is placemaking. And some of you may be familiar with placemaking, but placemaking surrounds and involves creating a site like, for instance, Riverwalk. A great example of a place that's close to businesses, close to shopping, recreation, having those things that attract people my age and the millennial age group to this area. And placemaking is a big part of it. We do have a need for that here. We do see it on Bridge Street. We do see it in other in parts of the community, but there is more of a need for that. And I would say that it's an easier thing to tackle because as far as investment goes, baby boomers and people that are going to be retiring, they're also going to want the entertainment. They're also going to want to have the recreational things to do. So this is, again, not 100% about millennials. This is about the community. This is about starting to have a vibrant nightlife, the things that we have heard over and over again as we talk to people in the community. The thing that's a little bit harder, a little bit more challenging, placemaking doesn't cut it because we also need to address the workforce housing issue. When I say workforce housing, what I'm talking about is we don't say affordable housing because it has a negative connotation, but that's exactly what it is. It's affordable housing. Affordability in terms of not spending 50% of our incomes on housing, and that's the current state that it is. And we presented to the county commissioners on Tuesday, and social media flooded that night from people that had left the area, that don't live here anymore, saying, you know, I can live in North Carolina and have a mortgage and pay 30% less than what I'm paying for a one-bedroom apartment in Manatee County. That's a very, very alarming statistic when you think about it. And again, that points that people are willing to pick up and move. Millennials, they don't have the kids, they don't have the attachment to a community. They can pick up, they can go elsewhere. And you know, we have some places really close to here in St. Pete and in Tampa that make that easy for them. So that's something that we want to address. And that leads to the discussion of what we're talking about today, density and intensity. And what is that? And that's kind of the third thing that came out of this, is that density intensity supports walkability, the ability to be living an affordable lifestyle where you don't need to own 2 cars or a car. You can walk places. That density of population also allows for people to be able to be engaged and close to the entertainment, the nightlife that they want. And ultimately, it's a healthy lifestyle that appeals to the millennial age group. And we've also talked a lot about mixed use, multi-use land development, and that's as simple as, you know, when I lived in Washington, D.C., I lived on top of a Target. And so whenever I needed something, I could walk downstairs and go to Target and walk back upstairs. And it's really convenient. And it's a lifestyle with millennials who are working, you know, sometimes 10, 12-hour work days. It makes it easy for them to get to the store because if you know, Publix is closed at 9 and I don't get off till 10, it's hard to go shopping. So, you know, those are the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to accommodate. And so at the county, what is the county doing? And we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday with the commissioners, and we'll just kind of reiterate that to you guys. And that's, first of all, we're revising land development code. That's a big roadblock we found as we talked to people in the community. We have a land development code, and I'm not a specialist by any means, but it favors suburban style living. It favors suburban sprawl, and we need to change that code to match more to an urban style living. And so the county has recognized that. As we talk to people in the community, they encourage it, they're happy to see it, and it's currently going on. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in this topic, to play a role in that, be part of that discussion. And at the county also, we have addressed the millennial issue by creating a team of millennials. Some of them are here today. They're my support network, and they help us in a lot of ways because they're out talking in the community, again, talking about the big 3, developers, government, and the consumers. And so we want to go ahead and have that conversation with them and continue that. So what can you do to be an advocate? What can you do to get involved? If you have millennials in your family, people close to you, you can tell them to be engaged. Get involved with groups like Manatee Young Professionals. Get involved in the community and play a role. If you're an employer of millennials, allow them to come to meetings like this or encourage them to go to meetings like this. This is how we're going to get that discussion going. And finally, what can the government do better? right now what we're trying to do is keep these projects and discussions going, continue to look at ways that we can spark urban core development, revitalize depressed communities, and keep this discussion relevant. And I think that with the amount of news and media that we're getting on the topic, I think the discussion has really just started. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Tiger Bay. My name is Jackie Dzelski, and as Misty introduced me, I'm the Executive Vice President at the Manatee Chamber of Commerce. I've been with the organization for 19 years, so I started when I was the youngest of young professionals at the Chamber, and while I'm not even close to being a millennial any longer, I am Gen X, which I feel like is that generation that is often getting skipped over because you've got this huge group of millennials, you've got the boomers retiring, and then our poor little Gen X in the middle that gets forgotten, but our needs are similar as well. So for those of you trying to remember the definition, millennials 1980 to 2000, those of us Gen X, we were about 1965 to 1980, and our boomers are those pre-1965 as well. And so that Gen X generation right now is about 66 million people in our country, and that millennial population is about 75.3 million, and that boomer is 74.9. So millennials are already outnumbering boomers, and soon Gen X will outnumber boomers as well. So you combine what we define as young professionals, which pretty much relates to that Gen X and millennial, and as Ogden mentioned, and as the topic today leads you to believe, it really does matter. The Manatee Young Professionals is a program of the Manatee Chamber we started back in 2000 because we had companies that were coming to the Chamber and saying they needed help when they were trying to recruit new talent, young talent to this community, and they needed a place for them to plug in because, let's be honest, particularly back 20 years ago, Florida did not exactly have the reputation as a young state. So it was where everybody's grandparents lived, right? It's where everybody went to retire. And as a vibrant business community, and you all being business leaders, you know that's not the case. It was part of it was a marketing issue. And so we created the Manatee Young Professionals to engage young professionals, and we thought our biggest audience would be those that were new to our community. Well, what we quickly discovered through surveying those members was that at least half of our membership, and it's pretty much stayed consistent throughout our 15-year history, is that half of our members have been here 10 years or longer as young professionals. So they've either stayed in our community because of the great educational opportunities we have in our region and they stay, or they've moved back because family was here, they went away to school and then came back. And so we're finding that it's both an attraction issue, but it's also a retention issue when we talk about meeting the needs of young professionals in our community. At this past fall's Chamber retreat, we identified this idea of attracting and retaining young professionals as one of our highest priorities moving forward this year and in the foreseeable future. And a lot of the discussion at that retreat with over 100 business and community leaders was this idea of how much housing is impacting young professionals' decisions to move here or stay here. And I see some of you that were there nodding your heads. We've outlined that as one of our biggest goals. We're hoping as the Chamber and the MYP program to equip our young professionals with the information they need to be advocates, because that's what it's going to take. I think our commissioners will tell us, our city council members, mayors will tell us, that's what it's going to take is advocacy if we're going to move the needle on this issue. And so what our young professionals have been telling us for several years now is that they or their peers are not finding the housing in this community that they need, whether that's because of its location and it's not near the places where they want to be and they want to go. They have to drive a half hour. If they're talking about where they can afford and find the type of housing they need, it's not in the areas that they want it to be in. And that it's not offering the right amenities, or in some cases it's offering too many amenities, and that's what's driving up the price, that they're willing to sacrifice a number of the amenities that maybe others would like because they don't need that. As I think someone said at the county commission meeting on Tuesday, they're not home anyways, right? So this idea of loft apartments, which really don't exist in our community, is just one idea that needs to be part of a very diverse and robust mix of housing in our community. Back in 2006, the Chamber had another priority around housing. As the housing market was almost at its peak, its hottest level, we were hearing from not just young professionals about this challenge of housing, but so many of your employees as well. Our service industry, our retail, our teachers, our first responders were having difficulty back in the early to mid 2000s around housing, and so we did a tremendous amount of research at the Chamber about what it would take to have and incentivize and encourage the development of what we termed workforce housing at that time. And what we heard with resounding unison from our development community was there needs to be more predictability and certainty in the process, more expediency in the process as well. And so we were, had our guns blazing. We were out there advocating on this issue. We were talking to government about this. We had business leaders aligned, and then, the Great Recession. And so affordable housing at that point wasn't as much of an issue for a number of years, but we're heating right back up to that same point in our community when it comes to housing. And I glance over and I see my friend Phil Brown with the United Way, and I would say that right now is the perfect storm on this issue because there are so many groups representing a very diverse population that are talking about this idea of housing. The ALICE project, the ALICE report, if you haven't educated yourself on who ALICE is, which is asset limited, income constrained, employed folks in our community, housing is a huge challenge for ALICE. I was Alice, my first 2 positions out of college. That was exactly my profile as well. And housing is a significant part of what keeps Alice at Alice's level, which is a big inability to save or to take steps forward from a socioeconomic perspective. So those Alice needs are the same as our young professionals' needs, are the same as a lot of the wants that baby boomers have as well, to downsize, to find something that frees up other parts of their income for things. So I think something that's really exciting is we've got everyone talking about this issue. So now is the time. Ogden also mentioned it's the time for the Land Development Code rewrite at the county level. And so this is the time for advocacy, is to talk to our elected officials, to talk to our friends at the county about what we want to see in the next 20 to 30 years. Because I think it was Commissioner Banak that pointed out at Tuesday's meeting, our comp plan and our Land Development Code have done exactly what they were designed to do a few decades ago, which is to create the community that we see now with a lot of development to the east and to the north, suburban development as well. But what I think we're hearing from now from our young professionals and other constituents as well is for the future, they might want to see a bit of a pivot and a change into some different development, this idea of redevelopment in the urban core, of infill. And so I think that the time is right in Manatee County for us to talk about density and intensity and creating the housing stock that we need, not just now, but that we're going to need in 10, 20 years as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Ogden. I feel honored to be up here with all these younger people because I am a boomer. But I have a couple of things. I prepared a couple of PowerPoints with Brady Woods and Tatiana Gonzalez help. And the first one we did was with the Chamber, Millennial Housing in Bradenton, what's up? And the one that I'm going to talk about today, density and intensity in our urban core, why millennials matter. And that's going to be on our the city's webpage in the Department of Planning and Community Development. You can go to the planning studies and reports, and you can see the icons. You can click those on, and it'll give you a full-blown what we're talking about. And what you'll find out that the city of Bradenton's got your back. No. But what I want to talk about, a quick story. Although I'm a boomer, I have a millennial story. I remember when I was about 40 years ago, I was 27 years old. I'm 67 today. And my wife and I, we got married, and so our first housing attempt was living with her grandmother. And we lived with her for 9 months, and it was hard. It was hard. No, it was more than hard. She sucked. And so we couldn't wait to get out of that house. And so our first attempt was to buy a HUD home. Susie, you'll love this. A HUD home that we paid $25,000 for. in our actually our mortgage payment was $184 a month, and the house was pretty bad because the largest room in the house was the bathroom. And from the standpoint of, but we liked it from the standpoint we weren't living with our grandmother anymore, so we loved it. So I can understand that. I can understand that. The other thing too, I want to talk in terms of millennials. We talked about some of the things that people have against millennials, and we're actively involved. We work and live in the city, and we work for the city, and we met at City Hall. That's where we met and got married. In regards to what I'm going to talk about today, and Ogden, thank you for stealing some of my thunder, but that's okay. That's all right. I think one of the things that we're talking about today is density and intensity in our urban core. We've done a lot of planning in regards to, since I've been here, I've almost been here 10 years. I moved here from Virginia. And one of the reasons why they hired me was the whole issue of design review and development review to be able to look at some things. And so at that particular time, we were engaged in some studies. Tamiami Trail was out back in 2005, 2006. And one of the things that the consultants told us, we need to create an urban core, okay? We need to create an urban core that will be defined, that would be compact, that people could walk to certain areas of that particular urban core. And it should be vibrant, and it also should be, you love this, Rick, 55% residential and 45% non-residential. That's what the whole idea of creating the urban core. And so with that in mind, we had a lot of other planning studies that came after that. And I remember the day that we were meeting with the county created this whole process of community engagement involving the whole idea of having a joint compatibility study that dealt with density and height. And we would meet over there, and we would talk about the whole idea of what needs to be done in density height. And at that particular time, the city of Bradenton and also Manatee County were really good friends at that time because we just went through a whole process with Perico. And also, we also had problems, they had problems with us in terms of height and density in regards to Tidewater Preserve. And so we went through a lawsuit, and we prevailed in that regard. We moved forward with those developments, which I like to call the bookends. So anyway, from that standpoint, we decided that we're going to look at density and we're going to look at height, and we're going to figure out what we need to do to be compatible. And one of the things they talked about how we could be compatible in our urban core or in our downtown was to think about design compatibility. And one of the things they talked about was form-based code. Form-based code, which would be more design intense. It would actually have a form that would actually be the most dominating factor in shaping how you want the city to look, and eventually the urbanized areas in the county look as well. And unlike utility and zoning, which with land use prevails over that, there was a big difference. And so anyway, we went through a number of gyrations of I like to call current planning initiatives. Number one, we talked about we had a City of Bradenton's evaluation appraisal report that was done in 2006 that talked about, again, urban core. We talked about what needed to do in terms of the Riverwalk. We talked about something needed to be done to the Pink Palace that is now the Hampton Inn and Suites. Then Manatee County governments with joint compatibility study, that study was actually adopted by resolution by the county as well as the city of Bradenton. And then downtown by design was the Bradenton CRA master plan that we're currently on right now. That's when we really started doing community engagement, involving the citizens, involving people, and having focus groups to look at things that we need to do. And lo and behold, we've done some things that are probably that will probably like the millennials like to see with those changes. Then the Bradenton Cultural and Arts and Master Plan in 2009, which actually morphed into Realize Bradenton, which is huge from the standpoint of branding the city and making the city known in terms of events, in terms of culture, in terms of public art. All those things will roll into one, and from the standpoint of making the city better and making the city more noticed. City of Bradenton's comp plan and air-based amendments, we changed those in 2009. Based on what we changed, we had to change our comp plan to deal with all the initiatives and concerns that came about. Culture, arts, and master plan, the whole idea of public art, all those things had to change. And then the land use regulation amendments, and John Deere will love this, we changed our land use regs to be more in kind to what developers like to see. Less cumbersome, being more involved from the standpoint of making things work a lot better, less red tape. And we went from 34 zoning classifications down to 16. 16, okay? And then last but not least, form-based code and the land use development regulations we did in 2011. So these are some of the things that we needed to do and had to do. I'm going to talk more focused on downtown by design because this is really centered around what we're talking about today in terms of urban core and the millennials, why millennials matter. Believe it or not, when I did research on why millennials matter, they actually have, you love this, Ogden, they actually have a website called Why Millennials Matter. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. Anyway, when we did downtown by design, we divided it up into 12 sub-districts. And I have these maps here that anybody wants to take a complete set, I have those available. And first was downtown Riverwalk, where we are right now, Courthouse Square, Arts and Gateway, Riverwalk West, Riverwalk East, Health and Wellness District near Manatee Hospital. That also includes the Bradenton Herald site, West Warehouse Loft District, East Warehouse Loft District, Manatee West, Manatee Village, in-town Manatee, and Manatee South. And these maps right here that I have on the table right here will actually show where potential sites for housing for millennials. And also what we have also is the permitted uses by right that are also non-housing, but these are amenities that millennials like to see, like restaurants, galleries, all those things that you need to have convenient type of uses when you look for housing opportunities. What I'd like to do is really end with future planning initiatives. We talked about some of those things, but I have a number of things we need to look at. First, you need to stop ringing that bell. Amend the housing element of the current comp plan to address millennial housing. Amend the Bradenton CRA master plan in order to address signage, parking, and millennial housing concerns and needs. I think this is the most important one. Collaborate with Manatee County on how to do adaptive reuse of county-owned buildings in our downtown that could be utilized for millennial housing. And then the last bullet is the need to dialogue with the City of Bradenton, Mayor, Council, and County Commissioner on what can be legislatively done in order to create and build these housing units. In summary, we must continue our current way of thinking, of making planning and implementation a community engagement process that is centered on the best practices of urban design. Like always, we must imagine our future and then get busy in order to make it happen. Let's get busy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to our panelists. Great job. And we are at that point in the program for questions and answers. So please, if you have a question, come up to the microphone. Be prepared to give us your name and tell us you're a member. And you can actually line up a couple of deep so we don't waste any time in getting the questions on the mic. And it looks like we've got a couple headed that way. Mr. Rick Foley.
Thanks, Misty. Rick Foley, I am a member, and I'd like to ask, well, all three of you, I guess, in terms of you talked about education as being a driver in the sense that that's what they want access to it. But yet we don't seem to capitalize on the universities. They're kind of in no man's land down there in the DMZ. What can we do to bring them into the fold and make them a part of this whole fabric of both Sarasota and for Manatee County?
Thanks, Rick, and I'm sure Ogden will have something to chime in from the county because of the Southwest TIF district and that new focus that the county has on redevelopment within that district that extends down to that education corridor near the airport on South US 41. From the Manatee Young Professionals perspective, we've tried to do some outside of the box thinking on how to engage the students at our local educational institutions. And we're happy to say we've made some good progress with State College of Florida and with USF in partnering with those institutions to allow their students to be engaged with the Manatee Young Professionals with no barrier of a membership fee. And so we've got close to 2 or 3 dozen of SCF students, many of them the student leaders on campus from SGA, from student government, involved with the Manatee Young Professionals. But Ogden, it's probably a good opportunity to talk about the buy-in that you had from the educational institutions at the IC Manatee event. One other thing that might be of interest to you all as you walk out, I'm going to slip it in, even though the question wasn't about this, is back on the back is a pin board. The IC Manatee event that Manatee County and this Millennial Dream Team put on a few weeks ago, the Chamber and Manatee Young Professionals had a booth that talked about housing, and we asked the question, where's your dream neighborhood? Where do you want to see redevelopment and infill? And so you all are welcome on your way out to grab a pin. There are colored pins based on your age. You don't have to attach your name to that pin, so it's all anonymous from that perspective. But take a look. It's interesting. That's from the IC Manatee event, and you'll see where folks of every age want to see intensive focus on the redevelopment and development of housing in our community. So add your pin to that board on the way out, and that way you add your voice if you weren't at that IC Manatee charrette.
I'll just go ahead and comment a little bit further. From the county's perspective, many of you may be familiar with the TIF, Southwest County TIF, but that's one way that the county's trying to address that. It is a 30-year plan, but we do want to start to look at ways that we can spur development, especially in particular around the colleges. One of the interesting things that we found in a study was the housing issue. At a lot of colleges, people get located near their school and they don't want to leave because of that. And we looked at affordable housing, and here in Manatee County, you're looking at about a 20 to 30 minute commute to either one of the schools to be able to afford to live near the school. So that was one of the key things that came out of a conversation at that IC Manatee event. And as I said, it really is, it's going to take time. But I think that having a focus and working with the universities and coordinating with your growth plans is going to be the way to start to get that development going.
Thank you. Our past president is here, Judith Sedgman.
Okay, I am a member. This is kind of a social justice question, and I need to contextualize it because I'm, like Tim, a boomer. My generation started out as the love and peace people. We turned into drug, sex, and rock and roll. Then we divided into yuppies and everybody else. And everybody else got left behind. And so our generation was ultimately defined by the successful, upwardly mobile, mostly white people. And I've been begging people that are working out through Realize Braden and other areas with millennials to please talk about how you can bring together the millennial generation without leaving people behind. Don't leave the vets behind. Don't leave the poor behind. Don't leave the undereducated behind. And there's got to be a way to do that, to draw that generation together, to work together and not just focus on the creative class and the upwardly mobile people who definitely deserve our attention.
And did you have someone in mind?
Whoever wants, Tim probably would be a likely person to answer it because he knows about the CRAs, but anybody that has a thing to say.
Well, yeah, we would love to say that we had our act together and that we could, when we changed our comp plan and our land use regs and that talked about workforce housing and gave bonuses for urban core and urban central business district and urban village and all that we knew what we were doing, and because we knew this was going to be an issue later on, but we can't claim that. I mean, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is that what we were trying to do was do sound planning. And I agree. We need to, when we talked about workforce housing, we really were talking about affordable housing, just like Ogden said.
Yeah.
Because I learned that when I was in Atlanta, we would talk about affordable housing, and developers would say, because right off the bat they thought about public housing. They thought about assisted housing. And I said, believe it or not, guys, somebody's gonna have to assist you whether you got market rate housing or not.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna have to assist you. And workforce housing was a lot more palatable, because when I say workforce housing, I would talk about these guys that their kids are getting out of school. Their first housing attempt would be housing these guys these kids would be working in banks, working in office buildings and stuff like that. And you know, they wouldn't be working at Fortune 500 companies, but it would be geared toward workforce housing. So one of the first things I did, I said, don't call it affordable housing, call it workforce housing. So we provided density bonuses about that. And Palmetto was doing that. I think even Manatee County was also doing that as well. So we all three entities were looking at providing workforce housing as a way to do that. But you're right, when we talk about millennials, we need to be talking about workforce housing as well. And affordable housing.
And amenities.
And I'll give a plug for Realize Bradenton as well, Judy, near and dear to your heart as chair as well. Is, you know, I personally believe one of the most diverse places in all of Manatee County is the Riverwalk. I mean, I'm there and I look around and I am so excited by what I see has happened by that placemaking, by that community asset that's open to all. And so I think the idea of placemaking is a way to expand that conversation as well beyond socioeconomic boundaries, beyond, you know, age boundaries, race, gender, what have you. And I think it's critical. Most of what you're reading these days about the younger generation, whether it's the millennials or whether it's, what are we calling our digital natives, the younger than the millennials, is that they're the most open-minded when it comes to diversity of any generation that they've tried to measure those types of metrics. So I think the future's bright when it comes to that, but it's an important reminder that you give us all, everyone in the room as a community and a business leader, to make sure that we're planning, whether it's for Alice, through the United Ways study, or any other demographic we want to list.
Thank you. Jane?
Jane Coker, I am a member. I'm just curious because it seems like there's been a lot of, you know, residential recently. Are they not, and I really don't know, I mean, the new apartments, are they not being used? Are they just not affordable? And is that being driven by construction costs? How are you going to, I just don't know what the answer is.
And are you directing that question to
Well,
Tim or Ogden?
Whoever can answer it.
All right.
You know, we went through a whole sea change. When I first got here, condos was the theme, and then we went from the standpoint of, well, we really don't want to do condos anymore. We need to think about, you know, luxury apartments. And so now you're seeing those things happen, because when the River Dance was done, it was condos, okay, market rate condos. And then when we got to the point of starting to do the River Song, it went from condos to apartments. And it went through a number of gyrations from that standpoint. What I would say, okay, guys, if you're gonna do apartments, I want to see luxury apartments with the possibility maybe they could go back to maybe condo conversions after maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe 10 years. And so what we're seeing right now, the market is being really driven now to more apartments. And so what we need to do is that there needs to be some way that we can maybe set aside some of those apartment developments that have a high number of units, could be set aside for workforce, could be set aside for millennial rents that are going to be a little bit lower than $1,000 a month. Because right now what we're seeing, like in St. Pete, you got to have the jobs, you got to have the income to be able to afford the rent range that millennials would need to have, and you got to make $47,000 a year at least, you know, and so those things have to match up. Those things have to match up. I think one of the things we talked about is how do we incentivize developers to build units that's going to be in that rent range, and that's going to be the dilemma. You know, some of the things we talked about, maybe relaxation or waiving impact fees. You know, that's something that can be discussed. That's something that has to be legislatively done between City Council of Bradenton as well as county commissioners here in Manatee County. I'm willing to have that conversation, but you know, those are some of the things we're looking at. But right now, a lot of the developers are not building apartments that's going to be in that in that rent range that would be more enticing to millennials. And so that is a big dilemma.
I think that was my question.
Mhm.
Has there been any kind of a survey? Is that filled up? Is it vacant? I mean, are people renting them?
People are renting it.
Are they?
Yeah, people are
so
renting it.
it's not a bunch of empty places sitting there.
No, no. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I know it's leasing up. I'm talking about a riverfront. Yeah,
Okay.
and more apartments coming.
John Neal.
Hello, my name is John Neal. I'm a Tiger Bay member. I know a little bit about housing, a little bit about development, just a little. I've listened very interested. You know, I appreciate you all taking your time to present. It's no secret sauce. There's no magic in building workforce housing versus building affordable housing or luxury housing. It's just math, right? It just gets down to math, right? So it doesn't matter what anything costs. You can't lower the cost by incentivizing fully. You know, it's one way you can bring the bottom up. It really only matters what you can sell a house for. Since we're talking about millennials, I'll focus on millennials. And this is an open panel question, so I hope you all think about a response. Personally, I feel the problem that millennials struggle with here, and I know a few. There was one at my table. I'm not sure if everybody has a millennial at their table or not, but JOBSs are the problem in Manatee County for millennials. It's the biggest problem. You know, I think you can look at who you know and your businesses and the industries that have been created here in the last 10 or 15 years and realize that millennials have no choices, or their choices are limited primarily to the service industries, but not the career-building manufacturing jobs which existed here for so long. Sometimes we say we used to build boats and we squeezed oranges and we did things like that, but those things haven't been replaced. Anyways, in order to make math work, things have to be radical, like the suggestion that we look at areas like West Bradenton, which is an area that is ripe for redevelopment, and make a suggestion like doubling the density in those areas, even doubling the density in areas that are farther east. Because when you focus on it, there's some laughing there because they know that I'm a developer and they look right at my billfold when I say that. But the truth is that the problem for millennials and the problem for people who can't afford expensive homes is going to get worse because we have population, large amounts of population that are moving to this county, and we've seen this movie before, right? So it goes up and up. So my question to you in the panel is, what do you think would happen if we doubled all the density in this county in order to make housing affordable? No, well, actually, I'll answer that own question. You don't have to widen the roads. If you make the communities more dense, they're walkable. So not everybody has to get in their car to go to Publix. So, but that's a panel question.
Well, one of the things we did, John, when we were going through the idea of making a sea change and how we did our land use regs and our comp plan and all that, is that we looked at from the standpoint of anything that we would put urban in front of, like urban village, urban commercial corridor, urban central business district, urban core. We were promoting and encouraging mixed use development because we wanted to get people out of their cars. And also we wanted to shorten the commute times between home to work and work to home. And so we even looked at, corridors that were corridors that were not particularly perceived to be safe. We looked at 14th Street. We also looked at 9th Street, those kind of corridors. And, that's something that in terms of discussion we can look at. But the bottom line is what we try to do is really to make sure that the metrics worked in those areas to the point that it's really not out of kilter where we think where we're going to be now and where we're going to be in the future. And I think what we're seeing now is that because the county and the city is growing so much, and people are moving down here, and not only just for 6 months out of the year, but now they're coming down here to live, 24/7. I think that's something we might need to be looking at, need to look at. But you know, that's something that's open for discussion.
Did you want to make any comment?
I always have to have a hypothetical answer to a hypothetical question, right? So, well, I don't have a direct answer to what would happen if we just simply doubled density on every piece of property available in Manatee County. What we have heard is density, intensity, is critical. It has to be part of the answer to move the needle, that we have to have predictability and certainty in the process so that as you and your company go and do all the work up front, make all that investment up front, to come back 6 months, a year and a half later and have everything thrown out the window and start over, we're never going to get there if we can't find ways to encourage more. And we've made strides, significant strides, but I think there's probably more work to be done in finding that. You know, John Osborne, John Barnott have done yeoman's jobs in helping change the environment and what you all deal with. But I think that's where we get to is looking at density and intensity in the areas that it makes sense. And it doesn't make sense everywhere just to simply double density, but there are certainly places where it would make a lot of sense and would be part of a shorter term answer than some of the longer term answers that we're told we just have to wait for.
I'd like to make one thing. I was looking at we do have a future land use element in our comp plan that talks about density, intensity of land uses. In our urban core, or we call it downtown urban core, 60 units per acre and 70 with workforce housing incentive. In our urban village, 25 units per acre with a 30 or a 5 unit increase with workforce housing. And then our urban central business district, 40 units per acre with a 10 unit acre increase if you do workforce housing. All right, so there's density intensity. And I think I want to add is that when we talk to millennials, everybody was really centered on the urban core is the area where they live in.
Thank you very much. Steve.
Hi, Steve Vernon. I'm a member. It's an open panel question that I have. Why do the governmental agencies seem to have so little trust in the free enterprise system? And why is it so overregulated? And why is there so much faith in the central planning and governmental interference when we should really just open it up to free markets, which served us so well for the last several hundred years?
Tim, do you want to take that on?
Yes, Tim again. Well, we would love the free market to come and develop our urban core of our city. But what we've had over years and years, you know, that's why they created things like new market tax credits and low-income housing tax credits, because there was no incentive for the private sector to do these kind of deals. We don't have to incentivize the areas that are greenfields in our city. And normally what we have to do in terms of developing greenfield areas, we would get voluntary annexations. People would want to come into the city, and then they would develop it. We don't need incentives for that, but we do need incentives primarily in a lot of the urbanized areas of our city, because it's redevelopment, and redevelopment is tough. Redevelopment is tough, and so this is something that's not only a dilemma here, but it's all over this country. We would love for the private sector to come in and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. I got the juice, I got the passion, I got the commitment. All I want you to make sure is I can do it by right, and I get my building permit. We would love to do that. So if you got a couple of deals, come on down. Okay.
Becky.
My name is Becky Kness, and I'm a Tiger Bay board member. This is an open panel question, and for context, I want to just let you know a little bit about the achievements that have been made when the city and the county have worked together. And we've been a recipient of some of that collaboration with much gratitude and benefit to the community. The Palmetto Leadership and Learning Center that we have won an award from the Florida Planning Association in the Hard Won category because of the way the city of Palmetto, Manatee County, the school district, and a number of other partners, including us, got together and made something happen over there with that campus. We did another project in East Bradenton with the city of Bradenton and have a presence there that has helped address crime and some of the needs of families relating to childcare. And when we talk about infrastructure, it's important to get this conversation into the dialogue about family needs. I know at the Chamber, when folks come into the community, they ask what kind of educational support and childcare support services are available in these neighborhoods. There was a consultant that did a survey for Manatee County and was paid a handsome sum to tell us after a lengthy study that the answer to a lot of these issues is in education and jobs. So while we're talking about jobs and business, we've talked a little bit about higher education. Can we talk a little bit too about how crime spikes after school lets out and the importance of after-school education and development, remedial education, family support, infrastructure in these communities within walking distance, and that southwest area where we have our third project waiting in the wings and seeking HUD funding with answers to a lot of the growth opportunities for the families that are living in poverty in these neighborhoods and need that kind of support for their children so they can work.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to ask either Ogden or Jackie if you would like to respond to that. And I'm going to ask that the next questions be a little bit shorter so that we can get everyone's questions on this program. Ogden, you want to take a stab? Okay.
Thank you for coming up and asking the question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but what I can tell you is that I know from my personal experience that that's one of the concerns about moving into an urban community is what the school systems are like. And I think that that's something that has kind of got shuffled in what we're talking about because it is a really important factor. I know that as we talked about the different diversity within the millennial group, our community here has a dynamic that's different than a lot of other communities with millennials in that they have a lot of single mothers with kids. And that's something that we've started to have that discussion in, and we're hoping to incorporate. I invite you to come to the table and talk about these topics. We'll definitely engage you and hear you out on those things for sure.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to that, or shall we move on to Ben?
Thank you. I think my question today is a little more developer-centric, probably more geared towards Ogden and Tim. It's obviously silly to think that a developer is going to come into town and just do us all a favor and make these apartments that are, within that medium income range. They need to make a profit. They need to make money. They have bills to pay as well and employees to feed. At the same time, we don't want to just look to government and ask them to pay for everything and just eat the cost with our tax dollars as well. So there's that happy middle ground. Can you address, I think, Ogden, I know you'd mentioned in your millennial survey group that you had met with, I believe, like the Florida Regional Planning and Zoning Association and the Gulf Coast Builders Exchange and some other developers and construction trades. Can you address, when you met with them, what their, I guess, complaints or challenges were when they want to go and do these types of things, the problems that they were running into trying to make that concept work where they could build that mid-level market rate housing for millennials? And Tim, if you could answer, at least from the city's perspective, and I think you touched on it earlier, what the city is doing and maybe what the county is doing or can do to help developers be able to afford it without it all being put on the backs of the taxpayers to foot the bill for this.
Thank you, Ben. And I'm going to ask that you keep your responses brief, please. Okay?
try to keep it as brief as possible. It's a great question, Ben. One of the things when we talked to Gulf Coast Builders Exchange that came about was they didn't want to see a reduction of fees, but they wanted to see the timing and scheduling of those fees possibly move to the back end, which would allow them to make an investment in a community that would be seen as more risky, going into a community that maybe is a depressed area. And I think that government will hear that out, because that gives them they're helping build the community. It's going to benefit by raising property values and things of that nature. And you know, I think it's that we look at so many single family homes and things that are on the books that are going to continue to be built. And as builders, I think part of it was that maybe some of them haven't even really thought about this concept, with the exception of the millennial workforce that they're dealing with. But you know, again, like I said, one of the things is not reduction of fees, but looking at rescheduling and timing of those fees.
I think one of the things they teach you in planning school is to do good research. I think one of the things we need to look at what other jurisdictions are doing, where you have a large concentration of millennials, and what they have done to incentivize that is not only to retain millennials, but also to gain millennials. States like in Tennessee and believe it or not, in Kentucky, South Carolina, and North Carolina. In my conversation with some of my colleagues, they have huge incentive packages to make these kind of deals work, and also with the counties and cities like in Charlotte, in Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. So that's something we would probably need to do.
Thank you. And the last question today is from one of my neighbors. Please come up and ask your question and tell us if you're a member.
Hi, I'm Mitch Mallett. I'm a member. I've lived in Manatee County for about 19 years now and raised my kids here. And but you know, it doesn't matter what year you were born. I think it's all about quality of life. And we need a master plan that would reflect quality of life. And maybe I was spoiled, you know, for living both in Rhode Island and New Jersey, where master plans were held to, were well designed for the long-range planning and the implications of what that development's going to look like 20, 30 years from now. And it may be because they don't waive the master plans. You know, we need the master plan should be geared for the quality of life and what the county should look like, not for the profitability of the developer and how profitable that could be. You can have some increase in densities in select areas, and, you know, especially the urban core here, but to just blanket double the density throughout the county would be a nightmare. You know, I lived here at 19 cycles, and you know, in the summer, you look forward to the fall when the season begins, because it cools off, because I'm tired of the heat. And then at the end of the season, you can't wait for the crowds to go away so you can drive around and get around.
Mitch, do you have a question?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, please.
All right. One thing I do want to say is I'd like to see some more bike paths, you know, because I can get around faster on a bike than I can in a car. So that's a little plug there. But I'm just respond to some of the conversations I heard, and I'd like to see that the master plans be for the long term and understand the impact and the crowded roads that we now experience here.
So no question.
Well, anybody want to respond to what I said?
Okay, we're going to make it quick, please.
In our comp plan, we talk about bike paths. We talk about collaboration, not only from the standpoint of working with other jurisdictions in our county, but also working with Manatee County. And so we've had those conversations, and we've had those discussions on how to make that work. I think the main thing is that we got to continue to talk about it from a sustainable standpoint, and with conversations like we're talking about with millennials as well as Gen Xers and all that, who really push that whole idea, having bike paths, we can make it happen.
All right, great. And so now I'm going to ask our secret board member, who has been listening carefully to the questions, to please come up and tell us who wins the Tiger by the Tail Award. And I'm going to say you have to be present to win. A number of our people have left, so I hope we don't have a problem there.
I'm looking. My first individual that I thought would have won the award, he left. But the main reason for that is he brought up something that seemed like, based on the reaction from the crowd, it was controversial. And I think sometimes you need someone to shake the tree a little bit to get some good ideas to fall out. Being someone that grew up in Bradenton my whole life, and you know, sometimes you just need change. But after that, I'll give it to Mr. Vernon. I thought he brought up a really good idea there. I'm a free market proponent, and I think that your idea definitely stirred the pot a little bit and brought up some good conversation. So congratulations on winning the Tiger by the Tail Award.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you, Steve. We have some gifts for you. So with that, let me just tell you before you leave, we have a very exciting program next month. The title of the program is Avoiding the Pressure Cooker, Race Relations and Law Enforcement. I want to thank our board of directors. I want to especially thank again Ben Bacher and his committee for this great program. And I want to encourage everyone here to please get involved, and get involved specifically with Manatee County as they rewrite their land development code. Please get involved. Thanks for being here.